bit busy, but we can always share some dipsies. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to run. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, hi guys, Miss Liz in the house, and I am happy to have Helen Glanville all the way from South Australia in the house tonight. And we're going to be talking about her tea, and her tea is redemption through lived experience, rebuilding after loss, and second chances for people and communities. That is a tea we are serving in the house tonight. We also will be sharing all of her incredible work that she does and her book, Second Chances. So we'll pull that up for you guys as well. But before we get started, we're going to get over to all those platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Clapper, Lemonade, all those good platforms. Give those a like, follow, and subscribe, and follow the guests on those platforms as well, because they do make a difference for the guest and for the listening audience that resonates with the stories that come to the table. Also, jump over to the podcast apps: Podbean, iHeartRadio, Listen Notes, Deezer, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those good platforms. And then jump over to babyboomers.org if you're looking to be featured on different podcasts. Miss Liz has partnered with babyboomers.org for the last 3 years, and they have over 50 different podcasts there. So if you're looking to be featured on different podcasts and Miss Liz doesn't serve what you're looking for, you can jump over there and check out all of those incredible podcasters over there as well. So let's get started with disclaimer and then a beautiful intro, and then we're going to get Helen in here and we're going to spill some tea and have some fun tonight. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicating to sharing real life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I'm Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own good judgment when considering any action or decision that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners' and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or check out my link tree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. I, Miss Liz, welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, welcome to Tea Time with Miss Liz, where conversations remind us that every child deserves hope, every family deserves support, and every life deserves the opportunity for a second chance. Today's guest has dedicated her work to standing beside children and families facing one of life's most difficult challenges, the impact of imprisonment on loved ones. Please join me in welcoming Helen Glanville, CEO of A Second Chance, a remarkable charity committed to supporting children, young people, and families affected by parental imprisonment. Helen's work shines a light on reality that is often overlooked when someone is in prison. The effects reach far beyond prison walls. Children's caregivers and entire families are left navigating emotional, financial, and social challenges that can last for years. Through compassion and advocacy, education, and practical support, Helen and her team work tirelessly to ensure that these families are not forgotten, helping children feel seen, supported, and empowered to build brighter futures. Today's Tea Time will explore supporting children affected by imprisonment, breaking cycles through compassion and understanding, the importance of family connection, community support and advocacy, creating hope through second chances. Helen reminds us that a person's circumstances should never determine their worth and that every child deserves love, stability, and the opportunity to thrive. So grab your cup and join us for a heartfelt conversation filled with compassion, hope, and real life tea, truth, experience, and awareness. Let me get Helen in here and let's spill some tea together. Welcome, Helen.
Well, thank you for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you here. So let's get to know you a little bit, Helen, before we get into a second chance and all the incredible work that you've been doing. Who was Helen as a little girl and who's Helen now?
Well, as a little girl, the first 10 years of my life lived on the North Shore of Sydney in a street that was called Kissing Point Road. That is actually the place of my memories where I would walk to school. A very different place because it was the best 10 years of my life. I was the only child for the first 6 years, and then my parents kept having babies. I couldn't quite work that out, but yes, I am the eldest of 5. Then we moved on. We had to move because the family got bigger, so we needed a bigger house. And one thing that disturbed me in my teens was how I observed family members and others just this high rate of divorce, and it really bothered me. So I just did a deal with God. I said, either you give me somebody special or I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. And it was that was at 16, and at ripe old age of 20, the family lawyer who I wanted nothing to do with, because I'd read all the headlines about it. We met 3 weeks later, he proposed, and I said yes.
So tell us a little bit about who you are today, Helen.
I am now a widow, having beautiful memories of a wonderful marriage, which went for 42 years. We have 2 wonderful sons, and now I have a little 3-year-old granddaughter. So now I'm in that season of my life where I'm rediscovering who I am. I'm traveling. I'm being the best grandma that I can be, and enjoying life. So it's taken a while for me to get to this point to even talk about my husband without getting teary, because we were very close and we achieved much together. And I can tell you, to unravel your thinking process of, planning for 2, shopping for 2, doing everything for 2, and then suddenly it's for 1. I had to relearn how to cook for 1, how to plan for 1, how to just move forward for 1. And it's quite an adjustment when more than half of your life is spent thinking for 2.
Well, 42 years is a long time to be with someone.
Yeah. Well, actually, I knew him for 46, but, marriage-wise, it was 42. And some of those years he was in prison. Just to give you a bit of background, you guys are in the Northern Hemisphere. Back in the 70s, you may not have read the headlines that we had here in Australia, but my husband was under the immense pressure of the credit squeeze of the 70s. He was a lawyer. He had a trust fund, but he was also a very wealthy man in his own right. Some of the interest rates were popping out to 24%. So some people complain about interest rates today. They know nothing compared to that season. And so he did a very unwise thing. He took a one-way ticket to Rio. Now, that's not highly recommended. It's not something that anyone should do, but he surrendered all his wealth. He had amazing wealth, which he inherited, as well as being a high-flying lawyer in Sydney. He was basically advised just to get out of circulation for a bit, but it backfired. So when he got to Rio, and he went to the airport to collect or pick up his mistress at the time, 3 months later, they realised that Interpol were looking for him, so they just, as you do, threw him into prison. There were no charges against him by Brazil, but back at home here in Australia, the government was wanting an extradition treaty. And to this day, there is still no extradition treaty. So he suffered the humiliation and the horrendous conditions of a Brazilian prison for 15 months. And
Wow.
the headlines back home were pretty bad. Um, but he had been our family lawyer. Yes, he made foolish decisions, but in that process, he lost everything. And my father is the key to all of this because my father had a dream. He'd never had, to my knowledge, never had a dream before or since, but he had a dream. And the dream was that if I had lost all my wealth, if I had lost all my friends, if I had lost my station in life, and my wife divorced me while I was overseas, I'd like to think somebody, somewhere, would give me a second chance. And that was my father's dream. So he followed that through. He went to visit Jeff in the Sydney police cells, and he said he realised that Jeff was remorseful. You can't go much lower than losing everything and having, and he came back to Australia to face the music, to just do the crime, do the time. And the police thought my father was an idiot because they thought that Jeff was a flight risk and he'd, disappear again. But my father stuck to his guns. At the time, our family home was worth about $54,000, and the bail set by the courts, for a guarantee, was $50,000. So my mother and father signed over our family home to get
Wow.
this guy out of prison, to give him a second chance. But my father didn't think it was a risk because my father thought that this man had learned his lesson well and truly. But then we met, and 3 weeks after meeting, this is the man I wanted nothing to do with, right? Wanted nothing to do with because he was a divorcee, he was 20 years older than me, he was a well-known womanizer, he was penniless. So what did he have to offer? He didn't tick any boxes as far as my parents were concerned. 3 weeks after we meet, he proposes and I say yes.
Amazing what love will do, right? Even with the
It's
bad boys.
crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, really crazy. But I knew he was remorseful. And yes, I fell. I fell head over heels at the ripe old age of 20. He was 40. And my parents didn't really like the concept of a divorcee. But um, he wanted to see his children. He had 3 children by his first wife. And then he worked on his case until he went to court, which was another 15 months. So he was hot as far as the media were concerned. I've done research, and in my book I have an appendix where there's something like 62 headlines that I've referenced as part of the research, and it's all in the book. His headlines were, the whole of Sydney was watching this guy. As I said, he's a high-flying lawyer. He was a position of trust, and he disappeared. The police didn't even know he'd left the country. They couldn't even track his passport records. So his official name on his birth certificate is different to what his friends and family would call him. So that was another little dynamic. On his birth certificate, it was Richard Jeffrey Stewart Glanville. And so the police would ring the relatives and say, is Richard there? And of course, all the relatives would know, well, who's Richard? That's just his birth certificate. Even his mother called him Jeff, and that's with a G, by the way. So yes, he was the family lawyer. We fell in love. That didn't make my father very happy. So my father withdrew the bail and put him back in prison, as you do. So my parents were devastated. They were furious. They thought, oh no, he's going to ruin her life. And at parties along the way, Jeff would get up and say, look, I was meant to ruin Helen's life, but clearly I failed. So we were We were thick as thieves. We were a partnership at every level, including his desire to help people who had been rejected, who knew what it was like to need to start over again. His empathy and his compassion for prisoners, especially guys who really wanted to change. I mean, you've got to understand, guys don't grow up till they're 40. And there's a lot of guys that go in and out of prison, and they're, 80% of all crime is drug and alcohol related anyway. But families are devastated mostly when a son goes to prison, and in particular when there's children involved.
Yeah.
So they are the innocent victims of crime.
Absolutely.
And Jeff knew exactly what he had done to his own children, the abandonment. Children feel false guilt. Maybe daddy doesn't love me anymore. Maybe I was at fault, and that's the reason why he went away. Now, of course, he was a white-collar crim, so, he wasn't dangerous to community, but he still nevertheless committed a crime. And I don't know if people in the Northern Hemisphere know anything about Christopher Skase, but Christopher Skase in the 80s was a big name corporate guy who drained millions of dollars for himself and took them over to Mallorca. So by comparison, when Jeff got back into society after he did his time, he dedicated his life to service. He dedicated his life to helping people turn around, give them a second chance, and actually have a life beyond prison, and also the work we did with the children of prisoners. But in relation to Christopher Skase, he just carried on being as selfish as he could be. So they're chalk and cheese if you were to compare the big headlines of Glanville and Skase. Well, they're the Australian bad boys. But, I don't know what you guys.
So you got the bad boy, and then he turned to the good boy.
Yeah. So I gave him a second chance. You know what I mean? Like, I was his second wife. And it was a new life, new state, new everything, because I was a through and through Sydney girl. You've got to understand, Sydney as the city, as a capital of New South Wales on the east coast of Australia, is a very dynamic city. And I was so Sydney-centric. I didn't think there was any life form outside of Sydney. That's all I knew. And when he got a job offer to go to Adelaide, oh, mate, I went kicking and screaming. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. It's horrific. I just couldn't imagine it. But he needed work. He needed a job, and he was made a job offer. So I came over to Adelaide kicking and screaming and 7 months pregnant. So we built a life for ourselves. We were blessed in an amazing way by living in the Adelaide Hills. You couldn't get that lifestyle living in Sydney. It's only a 50-minute drive. And we had 25 acres and raised some cattle. But everything we did was about trying to show people that even if for parents, it's not necessarily the last chapter of their child's life. They may have made bad decisions and broken the law and gone to prison, but that isn't the end of a story of someone's life. And even in our own relationship, we knew the power also of forgiveness. And sometimes we make big mistakes and we have difficulty forgiving ourselves. So the book has a quote about the power of forgiveness, and quoting at the beginning of each chapter someone like Nelson Mandela. He had to forgive his enemies, which he did after 27 years of false imprisonment. And then you have Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa, and then you have, of all people, Kevin Costner. Even Kevin Costner has a quote about forgiveness. And then you leave it to the very end, and of course, Jesus said 70 times 7. Well, how do you work that out? But the purpose of forgiveness is not for the perpetrator. It's for us to be set free from grudges, resentment, harboring bitterness, because they've proven medically, if we harbor bitterness and unforgiveness and grudges and all of that, we actually backfires and it impacts our health. Yeah. So we have to forgive to set ourselves free from imprisonment.
Well, Helen, we have a couple questions that are coming into the studio that I'd like to get out to you, and then I'm going to pull up your book. The first question we have is from Bargain Homes, and it is, Helen, what inspired you to write A Second Chance? And I'm going to pull up the book as well so people can see the book as well.
Okay.
Is this your husband or your father?
Yes. No. This is my husband at 46. And I was 26 because he was 20 years older than me. He looked young the whole life. In fact, we didn't even tell our sons the age difference. You know what I mean? So that is definitely Richard Jeffrey Stewart Glanville. And I had always wanted to write the book, but we wrote it together. Most of it's been written by us, and he blessed it 10 days before he died. I engaged a journalist to help me make it sizzle, and I did a bit more background researching so things could be in context, because Jeff was born the same year as Elvis. I was born the same year as Steve Jobs, or Jobs. I'm not sure which one you say there. So sometimes you just need to just pad it a little bit with a bit more context, because we've got Gens X, Y, and Z who haven't got a clue. They don't even know what Watergate is. You tell them, do you know Elvis? No, of course they don't know Elvis. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a baby boomer, and you're talking to these kids, and they know nothing. And it's only because we've been on the planet for so long. And so...
But we were the boomers, right? We got to enjoy things.
Mate, we did, and we made sure we did, and we're still enjoying them. So I'm a proud baby boomer. That's okay. So yes, the book. Why did I write the book? Because I wanted people to see that even though he got to the bottom, the pits of a Brazilian prison, and stripped of everything on this planet, he turned his life around. He turned his life around. So it doesn't matter necessarily how low we go. It isn't necessarily the end. And so that's the journey of redemption, a disgraced lawyer's journey to redemption. And he's helped hundreds of people. It's been wonderful. In fact, he had more compassion than I ever did.
Well, we have another question for you, Helen, and it's from Golf Life, I believe. What does a second chance personally mean to you today?
So it involves forgiveness. Sure, we can attach that phrase to romance, can't we? But if someone offends me and they are truly sorry, yes, I will forgive them. That doesn't mean to say I'll trust them again. Will I give them a second chance? Well, I've got to see the demonstration that they've changed. But it really does mean that we are willing to give somebody that second chance. But in my case, I've been given a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh chance. I haven't been the perfect wife. I haven't been the perfect woman. And you'll find that. I've told my story, warts and all, in my book. But this is where forgiveness kicks in. We have to learn how to forgive ourselves. And I think I'm a Christian, so clearly I have the God factor in my life, and it makes a big difference. Now, I think the problem is when some people say, I will never forgive them. That's sure, we'll never trust them. Sure, we'll have difficulty because of the damage. But at the end of the day, for our own sakes, we just have to let them go. They can move on, but we can't afford mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically to hold on to resentment and grudges.
Well, it eats us away, right? It doesn't eat them away. It eats us away. And forgiveness, a lot of people think forgiveness is saying, I forgive you and having them over for Sunday dinner again. That's not how it works.
No. Well, again, it's a demonstration of the fruit. The are they real? I mean, you've got to see the demonstration of wanting to change. It's not lip service.
Yeah.
It's got to be real deal change.
Yeah. And that's hard because a lot of people say they want change and they want to make a change, but do they actually make that change? You know, there's a lot of people out there that talk a lot, but they don't do the walk.
Correct. Yeah. Well, that's a waste of space, isn't it? So you got to walk the talk. Um, yeah, go on a
I'm a
holiday.
woman that says it like it is. Like, if you're going to say it, walk it. That's what I tell my kids all the time. If you're going to say
That's
it,
it.
walk it. And if it
Well, I
means that
hope,
you have
yeah,
a hard walk,
yeah.
you walk it hard.
Well, it's called integrity. And
Exactly.
integrity is about the character of someone. And if we speak something from our mouth and we don't follow through, our character is poorly lacking. So as a Christian, I say, well, you expect God to keep his word. The very least you can do is keep yours. Um,
Absolutely.
hmm. So I wasn't sure of your audience, what flavor they were, but
My flavor of my audience is all over the place. We have all walks of life joining us tonight from all over the world. So we do have another question here for you, and it's from Tools for Everyday Living. Was there one defining moment that changed the direction of your life, Helen?
well, my my husband was a killer charmer, and when he proposed, his language just was amazing. And he said, "I was once a millionaire, but I did not feel like a millionaire until I met you."
Oh,
So the whole romantic uh, experience was really something out of this world that I had never experienced, and he was a very dynamic, influential person. He was also smart. He was really verging on brilliance. He was brilliant, but clearly he'd been stupid, you know. Um, so the one defining moment, I think, was when this one man thought that I was the one, and I had never experienced that before. And I kept challenging him. I said, "How do you know? How do you know? I'm 20 years younger than you. You're so experienced," and so forth. But he said, "I just know." So my parents were so hostile to us that I didn't want them at our wedding. So we eloped. I finished my nursing training. He encouraged me he said, "Look, I've got a couple of degrees. You need to go and study while I'm inside." So I did. I went and studied nursing for 3 years. And when I had days off, my little Datsun 1600 found its way to his prison to visit him. And there were, of course, a lot of letters going on. But 6 weeks after I had got my registration as a registered nurse in New South Wales, we planned a clandestine wedding whereby he could not be married in the Anglican Diocese of Sydney because he was a divorcee. So in the 70s, divorcees were not to be married in that particular diocese, if you know anything about the Anglican Church. So we moved 100 kilometres north into the Newcastle Diocese with Rent a Crowd. 20 people were sworn to secrecy. And we had a borrowed church and a borrowed car. And, he had day leave once a month, which is what white-collar crims can have for resocialisation. He had to get permission from the governor of the prison. I drove to the prison early that day, picked him up. I had the hired suit and the shoes and the matching tie and all the jazz, and then drove him to the church. And we got there on time, and we were formally married by his cousin, who was an Anglican priest. And so then we went on to a restaurant, and we just had so many beautiful memories that day. But I was okay to elope because I just didn't want the misery of my parents on my special day. God love them, but they were melancholic personality types. and they really struggled in raising me because I was this precocious choleric type of kid. And they always saw the grey side of things, and I think they thought I was just really heading down a pathway of complete destruction with this terrible, terrible man. But we produced and delivered the first grandchild, and that did it all. Then from that moment forth, the
You
sun
just had to give a
shone right off.
grandbaby and it fixes everything.
Certainly did. It certainly did. But at that point, we were in Adelaide. So it was a good thing to live our life, our new life, second chance over in South Australia, which is where I am now. I've been here 42 years. I never thought I'd stay. But yeah, I think that there's a place for elopement. We had a glorious day. I didn't want misery walking in the door.
I
Very
totally
sad.
get that, right? It's your day. It's supposed to be special. It's not supposed to be about all the drama and all
Yeah.
the hate and all of, well, I don't like him and I don't like her. And it's not about that.
All
It's
that
about
rubbish.
the
It's so
couple.
immature. That's right. So I was 24, he was 44, and our guests were sworn to secrecy. But my parents were told the next day. I think my mother broke the cup and saucer she dropped when the guy came in for afternoon tea to tell her. But hey, it's a bit of my history, you know. It's a choice I made. It was probably one of the best decisions of my life. Um, yeah, what was the turning point? It was falling in love with a man who had been changed and wanted to help others. He's amazing compassion. He had so much mercy. I had a girlfriend say to me, Helen, you have no mercy. Because I was a pretty tough cookie, you know, on the corporate ladder. And I said, why do I need mercy when my husband has enough for the two of us?
He's the good guy now.
Yeah. He came good. Basically, God got him, you know. He was the prodigal son who came back, penniless, divorced, 20 years older. He didn't tick one box that my parents wanted.
So we have a couple more
That's
questions
life.
here for you, Helen, that are coming
Okay.
in that I'd like to get out to you. From Citrus is, how difficult was it to share such personal experiences in your memoir?
Okay, so I felt strongly to make myself vulnerable on the basis that people then knew, because I had as they say in the classics, I think they call it an annus horribilis, you know, the worst, like the Queen once said, oh, we had our annus horribilis. I think it's the worst year. I failed. I really failed. I was deceived, and I went off with another man for 6 months, and I wasn't there at the gate for when Jeff finished his sentence, and I failed him, and I had real difficulty forgiving myself. And the reason I made sure that was in the book was because I didn't want people to read the book and think, oh, she's just a goody two shoes. You know, everything about her life is squeaky clean. It wasn't. I made some very bad decisions. But this is where forgiveness comes in. Jeff forgave me, and Jeff supported me, and I'll be forever indebted to him for forgiving me and giving me a second chance. You know?
I like that phrase, a second chance. And I like that your book is called A Second Chance because, in today's world, we don't give too many second chances. We're fast to say, you know what, that's it. I'm blocking you. I'm taking you out. There's not a second chance. And I think it's a time in the world that we need a second chance, right? Because with everything going on as well. We have a question here from Link. So what motivated you to establish Second Chance SA?
Okay, so thank you for the question. It's a great question. We had already been with an organisation called Prison Fellowship Australia. Prison Fellowship is an international movement. It's right around the world, headquartered in Washington, started by Charles Colson. And we were involved with that for 20 years in South Australia. We were known to the Department for Corrections. We provided lots of services with volunteers to prisoners. So we were known. Jeff was known. He was highly respected because he'd been on the Minister's Advisory Panel. So when it came to a crunch with Prison Fellowship Australia, I don't know if you understand the meaning of the word restructuring, but I wasn't born yesterday. And the word restructuring, when I worked in local government, when I worked in defence, I was in defence for 7 years, was it really a dirty word? It really meant we're moving in and we're going to take full control and we're going to sack a few people along the way. So as soon as I heard that word, we then had a little scrum in South Australia, and we decided that we wanted to decouple. And the reason we wanted to decouple is that we didn't want to be controlled by Melbourne. We were just a little bit different to the rest of Australia, but we got the job done. We kept getting told, oh, you're parochial. Well, yeah, we are parochial, but we know each other and we get things done. So Melbourne, I'll just say Melbourne, wanted to bring out all these policies. They wanted my husband to resign. They wanted to give me a 1-year contract. The thing was that we were actually punching above our weight. We were bringing the funds in. I was pretty good at fundraising, but we just could see, in fact, the previous Chief Justice of our courts was on our advisory panel, and he just leant over to me and he said, oh, Helen, this is like mixing oil with water. So that particular year in 2015, both my doctor and my politician used the word decoupled. We're going to decouple, Helen, which was a fancy way, a new way of saying divorce. So you unhook a carriage off a train engine, you just unhook. So that's what we said to Melbourne. Well, we think we're going to just decouple. We'll do our own thing. So from 2015 to 2025, I was the CEO of Second Chances SA. So basically, all the donations would stay in South Australia. We weren't beholden to the eastern states. They didn't like the way we did things. They were risk adverse, all that kind of thing. But it's still going, and we specialised in particular for the children of prisoners, and we won an award. I flew to Canberra, the national capital, and was given an award in 2017 for the specific work that we did for the children of prisoners. We gave them Christmas presents in prison while they were visiting their parents, birthday presents every month, mentoring camps. We just focused on these children to give them a chance to make good choices for their own life and not necessarily follow the same pathway as mum and dad.
Helen, why do you think the society often struggles to offer second chances to people who have been incarcerated?
Well, it's a judgment thing, but it's also a fear thing. When you get to know someone, and that's the whole point of being a community visitor, when you get to know their heart, when you realise that they have woken up to the stupidity of their choices, and they're talking about, I really do want to go to work. I really do want to live and pay rent, like we all do. We've got to survive in this world, right? And a bit like four legs on the chair, we need accommodation, we need employment and or meaningful activity, and we need some form of education, so we're always learning, but we need a social network. And every human being on the planet needs acceptance, belonging, and value. And if we can give that to someone and they feel accepted and they feel they belong and they feel valued, and they're supported by mentors. You see, most of the guys, and it's a very sad situation, most guys that go to prison never had a male mentor in their life. They were abandoned as little boys. They didn't have a dad. They might have had a single mum, and single mum did her best. But it's not the same as having a dad mentoring you. And when I say dad, I mean a responsible adult, because a lot of these dads have been dads, but they haven't been very responsible and they haven't been there. So I think it's got everything to do with our own filter. Just because somebody's been in prison doesn't mean it's the end of the world, because it could be your son, it could be your cousin, it could be your uncle, and you know their story. They might have mixed in with the wrong crowd, ran down the wrong tram track, and the consequences. And of course, I don't know if you know, but most crimes committed by people who are impetuous, like the spur of the moment. Yes, I'll drive the car while you rob the bank. Yes, I'll do this stupidity while, and impetuousness can get us into serious trouble. My husband was so wise. We'd be at the very point of trying to make a decision, and he'd say, let's sleep on it. I'm going, oh, flip, I want a decision. No, we need to sleep on it, because by the time we get up in the morning, we might have the best response. Rather than reacting and making a decision on the fly, I think it's a trap. And many times we can make a decision on the fly and regret it later without considering all the pros and the cons, without even tapping into our gut, So I think
we're in the moment, right, Helen? And we want to react. We want to have an answer. We want a solution like right now. And I think that's a woman thing. I think,
It can be, but there's far fewer women in prison than there are in men. Women don't really.
Because we didn't go to bed and sleep on it.
Yeah, but obviously there are women who commit crimes, but it's usually the men that gets behind the wheel of a car and does stupid things, or steals a car, or breaks into your home. I mean, break and enters and that kind of stuff is mostly done to support a drug habit.
Yeah,
that's the scourge on our society. That's the thing that isn't being addressed. It's useless locking people up and throwing away the key and having that mentality. Well, a young kid, all they're going to do is go to the University of Crime. Unless there's rehabilitation, unless there's education in the mix, then, because a lot of guys who go to prison, many of them can't read or write. Now, that's a scourge on our society. Why can't they read and write? Well, mummy and daddy didn't encourage them to go to school, or they didn't have a mentor in their life. But, I think that's a basic requirement.
Yeah, absolutely. So with second chance, with the work that you do, Helen, do you offer these services to the people in prison, or just to children?
All the children, especially the children right up to 25, if they had a parent in prison. We had 2 years of funding, which was fabulous, and we gave them vocational training just to get them job ready. And that really spun my wheels. I get very excited about this stuff, because a kid that doesn't have an opportunity because mum and dad don't give us stuff is really a sad situation to be in. And so we would give these kids little stepping stones, like a barista course, right? They didn't have a mature, responsible adult in their life to teach them how to drive. So we gave them driving lessons. They didn't know about first aid, right? So every one of these little certificates, no matter how little or small they were, we might take those things for granted. Maybe all your listeners have a first aid certificate. Maybe all your listeners have a driver's license and they drive legally, right? Because some of our kids, they weren't driving illegally, trust me. And we had to, come on, do the legal thing. Let's get it right. And then we get them ready for a job interview. And so I don't know about you guys, but in our country, if you know how to make coffee and you're a barista, you can pretty well pay your way through university, because you get all these shifts in various cafes. It's a skill. If you do it well and you're consistent and you get paid for being a barista, so we would pay for their training as a barista. And even through COVID, we were getting kids into employment, part-time and full-time. That's the stuff that spins my wheels because it gives them hope for a future. And a lot of kids are walking the street aimlessly and hopelessly because they have no concept of a future. They have no one speaking into their lives and actually saying, what do you want to do with your life? That question alone is often not asked, especially by parents who would rather spend their money on the drugs. You know what I'm saying?
We have a question here for you, Helen, and it's from Gerald. Do you still discover new lessons from your own journey?
Yeah, I look back and I think, wow, where did the guts come from? And I think there are times when we make decisions because we're squeezed, we're under pressure, and we just do it. Like, I never thought I would be able to wait 5 years for my husband while he finished his jail sentence. But it's not until you're in that scenario that you realize, well, I'm busy with nursing and I'm busy traveling to a prison visiting him. And I had other things in my life, but you look back and you think, wow. And of course, you know, I was younger, but you just do it because you have to.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes until we're put into a situation, we don't know what courage we can muster. We don't know what strength can come through. Because a crisis is actually an opportunity for development. You can't get olive oil without pressing down on the olives. You can't get wine without squeezing and crushing the grapes. You can't get diamonds without putting pressure under the coal on the coal. You know, so good things can come through when you're under pressure. And we need to understand that when we're under pressure, for me, the whole of life is one big character development program. And we need to come through it with strength. And I was a real novice. I mean, I was the 20-year-old sheltered. I was sheltered in a very strict Christian home. I knew nothing about how the world functioned. But I learned very quickly, and being exposed to the prison system. But I had to know my values. I had to know who I was. I had to drill down deep into my faith so that I could draw and be strong. So all that stuff we learn, like, you know, the fruit of the spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, long suffering, all that stuff. I was a very impatient person, and it's to some degree I'm still impatient. You know, I want things to work. I want things to happen. But I think that when you fall in love with the right person, it's a very special thing.
Well, I want to talk about your tea because the tea that you gave me was redemption through lived experience and then rebuilding after loss, second chances for people and communities. Let's get into the parts of your tea first with the redemption through lived experience. Talk a little bit about that as the first part of your tea, and then we'll get into rebuilding after loss. And then we have a question here about a bushfire that we'll talk about in a second.
Well, redemption is turning things around and making it right. That's just a simple overview. But it also aligns quite closely to repentance. Repentance is really just turning around, stopping what we were doing, coming to our senses and seeking forgiveness, preferably from the Lord above, and then turning around. And redemption and forgiveness are hand in hand. You can't have redemption without forgiveness. You they're a tandem pair. So you have to forgive yourself, you have to forgive others. Even on my husband's deathbed, a pastor came to visit him and he virtually did a forgiveness audit. I was listening. I always eavesdrop, of course, and I was out in the hallway and listening to the conversation. And he said, Jeff, is there anything in your life? Is there anyone in your life that you have not yet forgiven? And I thought, yeah, that's the right question to ask somebody who's dying, because we can't afford to leave this earth with unforgiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the selfish, materialistic, empire building man that before I met him, I didn't know that man. That was before I met him. He was humbled through the Brazilian experience, humbled by being headlined pretty well. He sold a lot of papers. I used to joke about it and say, oh, well, you're the one that made Rupert Murdoch rich, you know, because in the 70s, the headlines were all over the shop. But I think we need to dig deeper on everyone's story. But you have to be discerning, you have to be careful. That person needs to show some signs of seriously wanting to change. I don't know if I've answered the question correctly.
No, you did. It came from your heart, Helen. So,
okay.
You know, we always second guess if we're answering a question right. But, you know, when the answer comes from the heart, you know, so you're speaking from the heart. So you're answering correctly. Like there's no right or wrong answers here at this table. Your second part of your T was rebuilding after loss. But we have a question that came in from Ariel that I want to bring up is how did the 2019 Australian bushfires change your outlook on life?
That's amazing. I have no idea how you guys get all this information
because Miss Liz puts a lot of information out when I'm working.
Okay. So that's my book, right? And in my book, I tell the story. So we had this beautiful God-given opportunity to purchase 25 acres in the Adelaide Hills. And it was quite a mystery to me because I was at an office party. The city engineer just happened to say, oh, we're going away for a couple of weeks over Christmas, New Year. And I jumped straight in and said, would you like us to house sit? And he said, sure, can you ride a horse? And I said, well, my husband can. Well, we stayed on his property in Cuddly Creek for 2 weeks. And in that time, New Year's Eve it was, or New Year's Day in 1988, we went for a big walk. We saw this beautiful property up for sale. And then I heard the audible voice of God say, this is your piece of Australia. I'm going, oh, that's interesting. So I just turned to Jeff. I said, this property's ours. He said, how do you talk like that? He said, we have no money. I said, it's irrelevant. Let's just go off to the real estate guy and make an offer. So we go off to the real estate guy and we talk about this property. And in South Australia, you can actually set your settlement date 3 months out. So we did, without a cent. We said, okay, we'll settle in 3 months. Well, we didn't go out to restaurants. We almost didn't eat. We didn't spend. We just saved whatever little shortcut we could take. And somehow we mustered up $12,000. And that was enough back in the day for the balance to come through from the bank for the amount that we haggled, which was $75,000 for 25 acres. And it was God's own country as far as I was concerned. So we purchased the land and then we built a shed and we lined the shed. It was 20 by 30. And we lived in the shed. And then Jeff's auntie died and he got an inheritance. And then we could build the house, and little bit by little bit by little bit. That was the life. And we loved our home. We worked hard for our home. Every weekend, you know, we'd have all this business dealing with people's issues and problems through the week. But we got up onto our property on the weekend and it was hard yakka, but it was wonderful yakka. I was a bit of a genius on the chainsaw, and I loved the chainsaw. In fact, my husband gave me a chainsaw for Mother's Day, and that was the talk of the, over coffee table. Oh, what did your husband give you for Mother's Day? Oh, he just gave you a chainsaw because he knew I was a worker, right? I didn't fear work, and so that's how we heated our home, because we had lots of trees, tree lots. Branches would fall, anything that was on the ground, I used to chain it up. So this beautiful, beautiful home, which we designed, it had turned posts with lacework, 10-foot ceilings, big, tall, gabled roof, red corrugated iron. I don't know if any of this resonates with you or your listeners, but there was a particular style in architecture in South Australia that we loved, and it was cornices, sandstone cornices, and red brick. And we just designed our little house and worked hard and had babies and we were commuters, and people used to say, how the hell do you travel from the Adelaide Hills down to town every day? Well, hello, we're from Sydney. What's your problem? Because if you're in Sydney, your commute can be a couple of hours, trust me. So it wasn't difficult for us to commute under an hour one way. And Jeff became Dad's taxi for the boys. We had a big hay shed with 500 bales of hay, and cattle yards, which you need, if you're running cattle. But then along came, in December 2019, a heat wave. Now, different to you guys, you've got to think reverse. We're having a heat wave in December. You guys are having snow, whatever you guys have. And the heat wave went for 5 straight days, over 40 degrees Celsius. Now, I don't think like you guys, so I don't know what 40 degrees is in Fahrenheit. It's probably over 100. Who knows? But we would get to 44 degrees. And so 5 days of this super hot weather was crisping everything up, was ready. It was just perfect for a catastrophic bushfire. And that's what happened. So we were down in the town in our office watching all the updates from the CFS. CFS is Country Fire Service. And we were monitoring the situation. And as far as we could tell, all day, 5 days before Christmas, the winds were taking the fire south, away from us. The next town was Lobethal. The next town was Woodside. The next town, these little hamlets, very, very pretty, very pretty. It'd get down to Oakbank and then Balhano, and on it would go. And we were just saying, well, thank God. Unfortunately, it was going to someone else's backyard, but thank God it's not coming up to us. And that's how we felt. We thought we were safe. And we went out to dinner that night down in the town with friends. There was a special on oysters. And so we went to this place with our friends, and then I got the phone call. Oh, Helen, we have to evacuate. The winds have changed. And so about 5 o'clock at night, another gust came through and just turned this fire completely straight through to our house. We didn't know until the next morning. We had a phone call from a neighbour. But we had said to our son, who had a 2-story house down in the town, we said, look, the police won't allow us back onto our property. Can we please stay with you tonight? Thinking that everything would be fine, So I took a phone call from a neighbour. She walked the block and she said to me, Helen, have you heard? And I said, heard what? And she said, there's nothing left. I said, what? What are you talking about? And she said, your hay shed's gone. Your house is gone. Everything's gone. So we had to process that. And of course, we were people that didn't put our trust and our faith into materialism. But I can tell you, we had a very comfortable home. It was our home. And we'd been empty nesters for 12 years. Our boys had left home in 2007. This was 2019, 5 days before Christmas. So we then were allowed back by the police to the property 2 days later. And as I was walking, we had a 200-metre house road. We had designed that to carve through the side of the hill to get to our home in the middle of the property. And as I was starting to walk, because there were lots of debris and fallen branches and blackened this and blackened that, and every tree was all blackened. And I took a phone call from my son, who was at the time in India. And he said, "Mum, you do not want to hear this." And I said, "What?" He said, "Mum, I can only tell you that I have this feeling that this fire is for good." I'm going, flipping heck. You know, I couldn't process, I couldn't absorb that. He said, "Mum, I've just got this feeling this fire is going to be good for you." So anyhow, we get up to the house. I said, "Thanks, son," and parked that thought. And we got to the house and nothing. So in the book, there are colour photos, very graphic colour photos of this beautiful home that was our home. One big mangled metal mess with debris and ash. And the government gave us, I think, $240, which allowed us to go and buy some underwear, a couple of T-shirts, a pair of shorts. You know, it was hot weather. And then if it wasn't for our son having a 2-story house, whereby downstairs, they lived upstairs, but downstairs we had our own bedroom, our lounge room, a bathroom. I have no idea what people do when they don't have family. Seriously, because some victims, there were 90 homes destroyed in that fire, right across the Adelaide Hills, and somehow jumped into Kangaroo Island as well. And 90 victims. And as soon as the government, the Premier at the time, his name was Stephen Marshall, and as soon as he used the word catastrophic, that was code to the insurance companies to give the victims another 30% on top of their insurance policy.
Wow.
So that was just amazing. And we thought we would rebuild. We thought, oh, well, it was about 14 tonnes of metal that needed to be taken away. I think I got $100 for every tonne of metal. Big deal. But the memories. Jeff lost all his family heirlooms. Like, he had some beautiful marble French clocks that were family heirlooms. He came from a family of wealth and descendants of first settlers, 5 generations. He had the most beautiful frames around his relatives. You know, that lovely gold, gilted frames. And I think he actually lost more than I did. I lost my corporate wardrobe. That's what I care about, my clothes. What woman wants to lose their corporate wardrobe? So there was jewellery, and the jewellery later was actually found in the debris and the rubble. And I can show you, and this photograph of this ring is actually in the book as well. Oh, it.
There we
So
go.
that's a garnet. Can you see the garnet in the middle of the ring? Well, that has a memory when Jeff and I went to Hong Kong and we purchased that garnet. And either side of that garnet are some rubies and diamonds. And essentially this group, which is a volunteer group, they plucked out of the fire a Pandora's bracelet that I thought I'd lost. This is of the debris. And they plucked out these other things which were black and twisted and melted and reshaped into something extremely ugly. And I just picked them up out of the brown paper bag. They gave them to me, and I went to a jeweler. And I said, "Do you think we can extract these jewels and turn it into a memory ring?" So I have this memory ring to remind me of the jewels that remained, even amongst the debris. But, you know, we didn't put our trust and our faith in materialism.
Yeah.
I think that's really a key. I think if you have done that or you do that, you've got a very fake foundation for your life.
Yeah,
There is
absolutely.
absolutely nothing we can take with us. Absolutely nothing. We come into this world naked, we go out of this world naked, and we have to remember that. And the interesting thing about a bushfire in Australia, and maybe you call them wildfires, I don't know, but bushfires in Australia, within 6 to 8 weeks, we get that beautiful green regrowth. That regrowth comes out. It's like a cleansing process. And the freshness of the green growth, the rejuvenation and the reseeding of the area is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Our Indigenous people, the Aboriginal people, they do that backburning as a matter of course. And it's a cleansing. And unfortunately, there hadn't been much of it happening in the area. There should have been more. And in other parts of Australia, it is happening. But I think Australia, the Adelaide Hills was just one of the many fires that summer. So how did I survive that? I felt I was drowning. I felt I was lost. Suddenly I found myself in what I call a concrete jungle because I so thoroughly enjoyed the fresh air. I so thoroughly enjoyed every morning this beautiful sunrise. Everything was beautiful about that property, you know.
So, Helen, we're over the hour. So I just want to get into the last question for you and then the final message, and then we're just going to do a wrap up. So what message do you hope readers will remember after finishing A Second Chance?
I want people to realize that getting to the bottom isn't the end. It's not the last chapter. I want people to realize that they might feel that they're in a hopeless situation, but it isn't always the case. There is a way through. You do have to plan. I actually have put together you might call it a blueprint for the future. M stands for MAP, it's called. M stands for maintain the things that you always had fun with. If you went to a bridge club or a swimming club, or you did an activity that had joy and fun, don't stop. Maintain those things. Then accept the fact that the tragedy, whatever it be, a fire, a flood, a devastation, an earthquake, whatever, accept the fact that it's happened. And then you have to know your priorities. And our priorities were faith, family, and friends. And they were the 3 F's. We realized just how powerful those 3 things were. And the last one was plan. Plan to have a coffee with a friend next week. Plan to go on a few days away. Plan, 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 plan. Reason being, you can then sort of throw a hook into the future and bring yourself, you have some hope, even though it's as small as catching up with a relative. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it has to be hope. Put that hope into your calendar. Put that hope into your future. Because if it's all blank, what have you got to look forward to?
Absolutely.
You've got to have something to look forward to, even though we'd lost everything. And in the end, we bought a houseboat. We called it Eternity. And that was my husband's happy place for when he was ill in the last few years of his life.
Well, Helen, I want to really thank you for joining me and sharing your story and your book with my audience and listeners out there. Thank you to the audience who have brought in their questions and done their homework and did all of the deep research in Miss Liz's post. I really appreciate that. We're just going to do a quick wrap up of what tonight's tea time is, and then we'll be back on Thursday and we'll do this all over again. So what an incredible, meaningful conversation we shared tonight. Helen, thank you for bringing your compassion, dedication, and advocacy to the Tea Time table. Your work reminds us that some of the most valuable members of our communities are often the quietest, and they deserve to be seen, heard, and supported. Tonight, we explored the challenges faced by children and families affected by imprisonment, the importance of maintaining hope, and the incredible impact that kindness, understanding, and community supports can have on a child's future. One of the strongest takeaways from tonight's tea time and conversation is this: a child should never carry the weight of circumstances they did not create. Through A Second Chance, you are helping children and families find stability, connection, and hope during incredibly difficult times. You reminded us that healing begins when people are met with compassion instead of judgment and with opportunity instead of limitation. As we close tonight's tea time, I leave everyone with this thought: How can each of us become a safe place for someone who feels forgotten? Because sometimes offering a second chance isn't about changing someone's past, it's about believing in their future. Thank you, Helen, for the extraordinary work you do to strengthen families, support children, and remind us all hope can grow even in the most challenging circumstances. Until next time, keep leading with compassion, keep creating hope, and keep serving real life tea one conversation at a time. And tonight's takeaway is every child deserves to be seen beyond their circumstances when we choose compassion over judgment and hope over stigma. And we hope to create the second chances that we can change lives for generations. Thank you guys for joining me on Tea Time, and I'll see you guys on Thursday, and we'll do this all over again.